Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to go back to July of 1983 and we're going to take a look at issue 75 of Dragon Magazine. I always like this particular cover. There's a lot to take a look at and enjoy here. The magic user with a jug of, quote, potions and his magic items there on another towel. This guy too. Public beach, swim at own risk. I like this guy laying out in a protective circle. This lady's building a castle. There's creatures floating in the water. I always like this cover. Okay, let's take a look inside. Harn, the dawn of a new fantasy world. That's our first ad, right in the inside cover. I had some Harn stuff. I liked Harn. I never really played it, but I adapted some of the stuff to my D&D campaign. Rollmaster, ICE's complete fantasy role-playing game system that focuses on realism. Yes, realism and time. It is a slow game, unfortunately. Character law, spell law, arms law, claw law. I did play under DM who used those rules, and it way slowed combat down, at least the way he did it. Then we go to the table of contents, July of 83. Can Sea Point be saved? Another winning AD&D adventure, and then the various things we're going to be looking at in the issue. Summer What by Kim Mullen, just a quick editorial. Out on a Limb, letters from the fans. Champions Critic. This guy didn't like their Champions article. Huh? I'm kind of surprised because Champions was pretty popular in Dragon Magazine back then. And then we go, translation design opportunity. Is Japanese your first language? You could translate D&D into Japanese. More letters to the editor here. Campaign adventure at its finest. City, the sacred flame within the tyrant's demesne. From Game Lords. Your source for a wide range of figures and games. The Tin Soldier in Springfield, Massachusetts. And then the James Bond 007 game. Role-playing in Her Majesty's Secret Service. Interestingly, if they brought this out now, it would be role-playing in His Majesty's Secret Service for the first time. Kind of interesting. The Ecology of the Mimic. I looked at this article a couple months ago when I looked at the Mimic. It's a fun little article by Ed Greenwood. Make history in the land of your dreams. Broadsword miniatures. And may glory be your reward. Minis were really getting hot in the early 80s. In like 83, 84 is when I started seeing them pop up a lot at our club. I always used them. I had miniatures from some of the earliest times I played D&D. They weren't well painted, or in fact sometimes not painted at all, and they may be on a piece of paper to depict the dungeon, but I did use minis. But they were getting more and more popular as the 80s went on. So Broadsword Miniatures out of Norcross, Georgia, apparently a suburb of Atlanta. The Sorcerer's Scroll. Gary Gygax talking to us again. New Denizens of Devildom, a partial preview of Monster Manual 2. And we do get these monsters in Monster Manual 2 later in the year. This is July of 83. This is to get us excited about the forthcoming MM2. And we got a lot of these monsters brought out here, and we get them in the book. So that was kind of neat. We got some of the Archdevils and things like that, the Dukes of Hell. Very neat. Didn't have access to that stuff before this. Then we have an ad for Feudal Lords, computer moderated play-by-mail, graph simulations in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. Your dragon hunt is over for only $10. Oh, that's a nice looking dragon, actually. Dragon Tooth Incorporated, New York, New York. That's pretty cool. More devils, and then the Best of Ralpartha. I liked these sets. I have this one. I think it's this one, and I think I have this one. I liked the Ralpartha sets. Contains 10 figures and retails for $8. Unfortunately, at the time in 83, I was making probably about $4, $5 an hour, somewhere around there. So $8 was still a little stiff when I could buy a module, or saving up 2 of those, I could buy a book. So I had to budget myself. I wasn't able to get as many of these as I would have liked to. And more Archdevils. And then Use Some Magic, the Dragonbone electronic die roller from Crestwood, Illinois. That's Crestwood. I lived in Crestwood for a while. My girlfriend, now my wife, lived in Crestwood at the time this was out. That's interesting. 14030 South Laramie, Crestwood. That's only a few miles from where she lived. That's interesting. New from GDW for Origins, Detroit, July 14th through the 17th. Game Designers Workshop is running all these different games. Tarsus. I love Tarsus. That's a great Traveler supplement. Traveler Adventure. And then the Journal of Travelers Aid Society, which has special feature section, Amber Zones, the Bestiary, and the Ship's Locker. So all these things for GDW for Origins. The Nine Hells, a lengthy article by Ed Greenwood. And this went nicely, of course, with the Devils we got earlier. Batazu in the second edition, as TSR succumbed to some of the parental pressure. But a nice long article. Ed Greenwood writes a good article. We got a couple more Dukes of Hell. We got each layer, which was really cool. I guess where my players ended up finding themselves in some games around this time. Higher level ones, of course. Couldn't put low level ones in the layers of hell. They wouldn't last very long. Rune Quest, the #1 heroic fantasy role-playing game. Played a little bit of Rune Quest. It wasn't bad. Chaosium Incorporated out of Albany, California. Didn't mind Rune Quest. Never caught on with our group. The one GM who was excited about it ended up he moved away shortly after we started it, and nobody really went back. We also played some Dragon Quest, I think under the same guy. Silver Dawn by Entertainment Concepts Incorporated. They were offering a $5,000 Quest tournament, and they were out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Continuing on, this very long article on the Hells, which I really enjoyed the heck out of, and read not too long ago for a campaign I was doing. And here's an ad for Bandersnatch Leathers out of San Antonio, Texas. I opened my leather dice bag and rolled them out, caressing the cool ivories in the palm of my hand. 18, I said? No problem. There you go. What's the difference between cool ivories and just dice? And that continues. Dice collecting has always been a thing in D&D, at least in my experience. I am not a dice collector. I am a dice, throw them all together as long as they roll true. I don't care about them. But my son Adam is a dice collector. My wife is to a lesser extent. Dice collecting has always been a thing, at least in my experience. Some more on the various layers in Dukes of Hell. And still continuing that after these ads. Encountered the all-new Advanced Dungeons & Dragons miniatures. I did pick up a couple of AD&D miniatures. I thought for the flagship game, I didn't think their minis were quite as good as what else was on the market, which did surprise me. I never bought a box set. I have a couple of the individual loose ones. And then continuing on, we get to level 5 Stygia. It's an incredibly long article, but man, some good information here. And all this still pertains. You can still trot this out right now and plug it into your game. We get down to fantasy portraits. Reveal your better half. As a fantasy gamer, you spend many hours creating a realistic character. Now bring your character to life in the form of a commissioned portrait by Ivan the Cat, fantasy artist, out of Cranbrook, British Columbia. Interesting. I don't know anybody who did that. I knew a lot of people who drew their own characters. My buddy Craig still tends to, or would clip a picture of some movie star or whatever and paste it on their character sheet. Chart a course to adventure, Privateers and Gentlemen from Fantasy Games Unlimited. And they were out of Roslyn, New York. Mutants, Men, and Machines by Roger Moore. Gamma World Creature Collection. This is the first of the Gamma World Creature Collections this would have been for second edition. I was really excited about this. I threw a hydrogen into a game. It's a mutated rattlesnake with poison bites, and I did a TPK in about 5 minutes. Restarted the game, said that was just a dream sequence. We restarted the game. I couldn't believe how dangerous that thing was. It literally wiped my party within about 5 minutes. The Radium, the Cycloptron, and then we got an ad for FRP Aid in board games, a fast-playing, easy-to-learn strategy game called Fantasia, and it was play by mail from Charlotte, North Carolina. Viking Games. Continuing on, the various monsters from Gamma World. I used the nitrogen. Those are pretty neat. Cybernetters are really nasty. I really recommend taking a look at some of these if you're still playing Gamma World. Even if you're playing any edition of Gamma World, these translate very easily. Then we get a new for summer play, The Companions. This is from out of Bath, Maine. They're going to be at Origins and Gen Con. So there you go. And then we got Flights of Fantasy from Citadel. We get some nice Citadel miniatures. I always loved Citadel. They were out of Ontario, Canada. I'm sure I have a few Citadel in my collection. I don't remember particularly buying Citadel. I always liked the look, though. I always liked that guy. I thought that was cool. Beyond the Rulebook, Procedure and Style Tips for Good GMing by Lou Pulsifer. He wrote a lot for Dragon Magazine. He wrote some Traveler-esque novels too. Pretty interesting guy. Superior Models proudly presents the WL100, the 100th Wizard and Lizard 25mm fantasy figure. I always wanted to get that guy. I never saw him in person. I always wanted that one. And these guys are Superior Models, and just ask your dealer. Game Masters Hobbies Incorporated. These guys are out of San Francisco. Adventure gaming specialists. And it is spring 1375 BC. Egyptian trilogy. Man, Myth, and Magic. Role-playing game of man's greatest adventures. And this was out of Dallas, Texas. I was aware of this game. I never saw it and I never played it, unfortunately. And then we continue on the GM style guidelines. Chivalry and Sorcery, the complete fantasy role-playing game from Fantasy Games Unlimited. These are the guys that brought us Space Master. No. Space Opera. Sorry. Brain. I was just looking at some Star Master stuff. So, continuing on, the very long article. Lots of long articles in this issue, which I loved, by the way. Cast your own fantasy figure from the Duncan Company in Calvert, Texas. We get the Wizard's Corner. Saskatoon's Fantasy Role-Playing Game Center out of Canada, Saskatchewan, Canada. And Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan miniatures from FASA. I never saw any of these. If anybody has the info on these or has owned some or still owns them, I'd be interested in hearing about them. I never saw any of those. I kind of wanted them, but they were never anything I came across. And back in the day, I didn't send away by mail for stuff. It was fairly unreliable. I bought a few comic books that way and it went well. But other than that, buying stuff by mail was not real reliable. The 1983 Strategist Club Awards and who you can nominate. Can Sea Point Be Saved? Designed by Bob Waldbauer. And this was the module entry design contest. I started plenty of those, never entered one. And I always felt that this design contest is what led to Dungeon Magazine. They had so many dungeons sitting in their files, they just said, let's do an entire magazine. I remember reading this one. I don't remember playing it. I don't remember much about it. Nice looking merchant ship. We're dealing with pirates. That's cool. And then we get to the end of the adventure and we get to role play with the best. Join the only official Dungeons & Dragons game club, the RPGA by TSR, back in the day. Even Orcish is Logical by Clyde Heaton. Make the system fit the speakers. I always like these language articles because if nothing else, you got various words you could put into your game in Orcish or whatever the language was. I always thought that was cool. The ad for Villains and Vigilantes, again by Fantasy Games Unlimited. Played V&V originally. Played it for about the first year I was role-playing, and then went over to Champions. And then coming through the rest of the article on Orcish, we get a back issue sale from American Creative Games out of Mount Prospect, Illinois. Games Plus is up that way. That's interesting. Language Lessons 2. All games need names, but don't make a game out of naming. You're in the Temple of Florwax in Shine Bright City, says the Game Master. You see the Princess Ulala and her barbarian bodyguard Upchuck, who serves the mighty god, the god. Who do you say smurders anyway? Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I default to Bob, Lloyd, and Eric a lot. It's just how I am. If I don't think a PC is going to be important, I don't flesh them out, even to the point of not naming them. And then what do you know? The player characters make him important, so I have to come up with a name on the fly. My players are used to me. They'll usually look at me and say, is it Bob, Lloyd, or Eric? Which is it? And I'll just say one, and that'll be it. And we'll all write a note about it. It's just how I used to do it. Here we got a launch adventure at these stores. The Hobby Game Distributors Incorporated out of Chicago, Illinois. Let's see, for Illinois, Illinois has had a lot of hobby stores. Buyers in Woodstock, Illinois. Friends Hobby Shop, Moikegan, never there. Games Plus, I just mentioned. They've moved across the street since this was published, but I've been there. Hobby Chest in Skokie, Illinois, I've been there. And Lyle's Hobby and Craft, I've been to. Before time began, man gazed at the stars across an ocean of space. Star Frontiers game universe. Adventure comes alive in Star Frontiers Nighthawks game. Nighthawks is pretty cool. It's a ship-to-ship combat game that was part of the Star Frontiers system. I like Nighthawks. It's a fun, easy to play, relax with your friends, drink a few beers kind of game. And then we're finishing out the article on vowel. All languages need names, vowels, and consonants. Traveler is guilty of this. The Villani is very hard to work with. My Traveler videos, you hear me stumble over Villani pronunciations all the time. Here we're teamed up for adventure with Border Crossing from Hero Games and Venture the J Jaguar for Blade. So Hero Blade Games and Blade are working together to bring out adventures for game espionage, mercenaries, spies, and private eyes. I thought it was kind of neat that they crossed the game systems. Hero did that quite a bit. There's even a Hero version of Traveler. Did a video on that a while ago. Meet Dave Arneson, co-author of Dungeons & Dragons game, special guest of honor at Origins 83 in St. Paul, Minnesota. They're brought to you by Adventure Games from St. Paul, Minnesota. So we're continuing on with the language, making your language make sense. Out of the Mists of Forgotten Time come the heroes and monsters of the Lost Worlds. These were digest-sized books that had the different monsters in it. I never played it, but they were always on the shelf. They're out of Manchester, Connecticut, from Nova Game Designs. I never played Lost Worlds, though. I saw them plenty of times on the shelf, so I never picked them up. And now we get new from Judges Guild, Tarantis. It's a city for D&D. That's pretty cool. Continuing on the language article. Still going. Wow, lots of long articles in this one. New Castle Creations, Dungeons & Dragons, Villains and Vigilantes Miniatures. Never picked up any of these guys either. Wizards and Lizards brought up again. Never saw those guys either. Finally wrapping up the language article. And we get an article for the probabilities indicate. We stock every imaginable role-playing game at the Dungeon Hobby Shop in Genoa City, Wisconsin. Conquest 2 out of San Clemente, California is a play-by-mail. New for Atari 400 and 800. I knew a guy who had an Atari. I think it was an 800. Boy, he could play games on that. It was so cool. This was from Task Force Computer Games. A new force in gaming. That was so neat watching him play it. I don't think he had any of these guys. But he had a couple of cool ones. Figure feature, humanoids. We get a different look. I look at a bunch of different humans and humanoids. We get TSR, Rel Partha's new ones, Essex Miniatures. I have that guy. Essex Miniatures, Asgard Miniatures. These are space guys. Castle Creations and Citadel Miniatures. I have this guy and this guy. It's kind of neat to see these old things. And yeah, we used to pick up miniatures all the time. I've talked about lead figure shopping with my wife back when we were dating. Just good time to be into D&D. Companion fills the Glorantha gap. The RuneQuest Companion. It's supplement for Cassian's RuneQuest. A nice article about that, and it looks like a review. Discover the excitement of cities. Mid-Kima Press, Guides to Adventure out of San Diego, California. Oh, cities, hundreds of encounters. Encounter books like these were pretty valuable back in the day. Are you a cold-blooded adventurer? Try our Reptiliads. Neat looking little ad, and then different items of siege equipment from Ratham out of Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. I always wanted a trebuchet. Still don't have one. Add some magic to your campaign. The Complete Alchemist, The Complete Spellcaster at finer hobby stores by Bard Games in Greenwich, Connecticut. Visit the Solomani Rim. It was supplement 10 from Game Designer's Workshop for Traveler. That was a really neat book. I remember buying that book and reading it. The Solomani Rim is, if you don't follow Traveler, it's where Earth is. And the Solomani are the men of Sol. That's why it's Solomani. And that was a neat little book. I was excited to get it. And this review is continued to the next page. Then we get RuneQuest Pavis, Threshold to Danger from Cassian. Fantasy Lords by Grenadier, and a little bit of magic. Have a lot of Grenadier miniatures around here. These were out of Springfield, Pennsylvania. I think Grenadier is still around. If you Google them, I think you can find them. These were some of my favorites. I love the Fantasy Lords series. I remember buying a bunch of these. And I still have them. There's the end of the Traveler article. Growth by Design at Coleco, designing innovative and saleable products. One of the main reasons that they're in business. They have 2 to 5 years. If you have 2 to 5 years of proven game design experience, you could join Coleco 83. Coleco Industries out of West Hartford, Connecticut. I remember ColecoVision. Tales Stranger Than Fantasy, Mazes and Monsters by Rona Jaffe and Hobgoblin. I did read Mazes and Monsters back in the day. I don't remember much about it. Oh, that was the Tom Cruise thing, yeah. I think it was. Um, yeah, Student Small Ivy League. Yeah, I did. I remember that when that was part of the whole D&D is bad thing because the unfortunate gentleman went up missing, and it's a whole thing. You can find that on the internet. Can you catch Jack the Ripper at Origins 83 and Gen Con 16? Jack the Ripper is an Ulrich Council game of bloody murder, mystery, and suspense set in Victorian London, 1888. And this was by Ulrich Council Publishing out of New York, New York. UK Revisited, Games Fair 83 by Gary Gygax. Just a quick look at a game convention across the pond. Super Game, second edition, the game you've been waiting for. Don't remember that one at all. And that was from DAG Design in Santa Monica, California. Recon, role-playing game of the Vietnam War. And it has different supplements. I don't remember this game either. Out of Lincoln, Arizona. Introducing the stars of the Star Frontiers game. I have a lot of Star Frontiers miniatures lurking around here. I've shown some of them on the channel. They come unpainted, and it turns out if you buy them when they've been in the box for almost 30 years, that when you pull them out of the box, they've pitted because of the brown cardboard in the box. Kind of neat. I did show that on the channel about 2 years ago from TSR, of course. And then we get a science fiction gaming convention calendar for July of 83. Battle Mats and Mega Mats. Got one of those around here. The Gamer's Guide for the different games and things you can look into and products you can buy. Continued on to here, the index of advertisers. Lot more advertising for miniatures as the 80s went on because they realized miniatures were really profitable. I was always surprised that terrain never caught on early in D&D. It's caught on now, of course, and it's very popular, but it wasn't really until the late 90s that terrain started catching on as a thing. Roleplay your way to London or Houston this August. Win a free trip by playing AD&D. Top player and events judge from the AD&D Open Tournament will go to London. Well, that's a pretty good deal. Running a little bit of D&D or playing from TSR Hobbies. Asgard Miniatures from the Armory, Baltimore, Maryland, and the various miniatures. A double-page ad available from the following fine hobby and game stores. Again, I always look at Illinois. Games Plus, Mount Prospect. Pegasus Hobbies, Round Lake. Don't know them. Black & Company, Springfield, Illinois. I may have been there. Lyle's Hobby and Craft, I do know I was at. And I think Game Preserve in Indianapolis I was at. Oddly enough, Valparaiso is only about 20 miles from my house, and I don't think I ever got there. Valparaiso Pet and Hobby. That's how widespread D&D became, is that pet stores in this area were also stocking D&D. We had one in the town I grew up in. He opened in the mid-'80s. And have you missed any of these great issues? You could order some back issues of Dragon from TSR, and then you could subscribe to Dragon from TSR. What's new? Comics with Phil and Dixie. Always liked Phil and Dixie. I always enjoyed Phil and Dixie. And then Wormy. Always enjoyed Wormy too. It was a good issue when we got Phil and Dixie and Wormy together, especially if Wormy was a longer one. Wormy tended to be kind of shorter toward the end of the run. Dragon, the official fuel for over 100,000 of the world's most imaginative gamers. Dragon magazine ad in Dragon, TSR Hobbies. Dragon was incredibly popular. Snarf Quest. Snarf Quest was interesting. I did follow it. I liked it. I thought it was good. I would have liked it better in color, I think. I think that's my main thing. But it was long, which was good. I mean, here we've got 4 pages for the first installment, or not first, but for this installment. And then we wrap out in hardcover editions of Dark Ages Drama, Advanced D&D Game System, just a house ad for all the different books. And July of 83 comes to a close with a MERPS ad for the Court of Ardor, Realm of Southern Middle-earth role-playing system by ICE, Iron Crown Enterprises, out of Charlottesville, Virginia. Had a lot of MERP stuff back in the day. Big Tolkien fan. Information not that easy to come by pre-internet. MERPS was the source. So there you have it. That's all I've got to say today on page 121 for Dragon 1975. Thank you for taking the time to travel back 40 years to July of 1983 with me. I hope you liked the journey. And if you did, please like and subscribe, leave some comments below, and I'll see you next time.